I hope you're able to take advantage of our last break. We have two more panels and closing remarks before we end today. We just want to welcome everyone back and find a seat. If you are joining us for the first time, we have a few seats up in the front that folks I'm sure will be happy to share their table with you. So we're going to start our afternoon with our next panel, which is focusing on best practices in culturally responsive services. This discussion will be moderated by Captain Damien Kilsback, the Director of the Office of Tribal Affairs and Strategic Alliances at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As you can see, Captain Kilsback is joined here by some very special guests, and so I'm going to turn it over to Captain Kilsback to introduce himself and the rest of our panel.
Thank you, Lillian. Pevia Shiv, Gutsnahashev, Gutsnahashev, Navopa Madonan, Na Ista, Na Sista, Na Sota. So, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I have a really good panelists of presenters here. So, I'm going to turn it over to our three panelists here today to introduce themselves, and we'll go into the panel discussion. Thank you.
Testing. Hi, everybody. Dohotne, Allison Kelleher, say Uza Tlege Hutana Etzlan, Tony Zagatsithni Te Hutana Etzlan. My ancestors know me as Manoyed Laka, the bringer of the sun. It's a gift that comes from my mother's family. We're matrilineal, or Dana, and we're from Nalahado. I was born and raised in Nome, Alaska, and currently work and live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm so excited to be on this panel. I'm working for Johns Hopkins School of Nursing and the Bloomberg School of Public Health, where I work towards indigenizing health systems for learners. I'm trained as a family physician, integrative and holistic physician, and also a traditional healer. I spent the past 40 plus years training in traditional healing, starting at the age of 4, walking on backs, was trained by my family, the Hildebrand, Summers, and Ismalkas. I'm also multicultural, in that I'm from Inuit country. I also carry those knowledges and am just so happy to be invited. Thank you so much, Masi.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colette Adamson, and I'm a research assistant professor at the University of North Dakota in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I also direct 2 Native Aging programs, the National Resource Center on Native American Aging and the Resource Center on Native Aging and Disabilities, and I am a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. Thanks so much for having us be here today.
I'm Itakepi. Leampetuki ake washte chichapelo naha. Chante washena petus papelo iuha. Chajemitha John Eagle Shield Senior Emacha. Nahamija Ia wasla makocheki. Wamli chikala wichoti emata hacha. How apelo. Dua dona la koteki namacho po ake mija delele prinktelo. Good afternoon, my friends and relatives. My name is John Eagle Shield Sr. I'm from Standing Rock. I'm from the community of Little Eagle, and I'm just happy to be here. Lila Yomakpecha.
Well, thank you for those introductions. It's always good that we introduce ourselves in our native language and talk about where we come from and the communities we represent. So our discussion today, I have 3 questions for our panelists. The first question I have, and I'll pass it left to right like a baton. What in your experiences or opinions may be a good examples of best practices currently in traditional healing? So I'll pass it to Dr. Keller.
Thanks so much for the question. I'm blessed to have a breadth of practice experience in both or all Indian Health Service, tribal, and outpatient settings, including even private practice. So there's quite a breadth of best practices regarding traditional healing, but if I was going to attempt to summarize it, which is challenging, I would say that best practices for traditional healing include coming from a good place, with a good heart and with good intentions. And that means that we're grounded in community practices and culture, often involving community advisory boards that are knowledgeable about traditional healing practices or culture. So for example, at South Central Foundation, where I was trained by my teacher, Frances Miller, who's from the Fish River people from Western Alaska. Thank you, Kuyanakpak teacher. I'm just so grateful for her knowledges, and I have to say that her techniques were very similar to osteopathic manipulation, which has been practiced as a gold standard of practice in America, and also is taught in medical schools. And so I feel like we've been practicing traditional American Indian and Alaska Native medicine actually in clinical settings for a very long time. So involving community, having advisory boards, and allowing for the community to name the traditional healers and to empower and teach the traditional healers are part of what I think has been important. So in our practice at South Central Foundation, we were put forward as a recommendation, and then our community was vetted to confirm, in fact, that we were traditional healers and that we were coming from a good place with the best intention. The other thing that I would say is important is that it's that there's shared power and definition that belongs to the community, so the community can identify what the program needs are moving forward and help to change and adjust if needed. We also practiced physical and counseling at South Central Foundation, so limited our practice to physical modalities, hands-on modalities within a certain scope, and then traditional sharing and talking and storytelling as another method. So I think those are some things that come to mind that I hope are helpful. Masi.
Yeah, so I think, I'm not a provider or a medical doctor, so I can't speak to that background of it. I'm a researcher, but I think I'll take this more from a personal perspective, growing up in my community and looking up to one of my aunties who ended up becoming a family practitioner. And I was always interested in our culture and our traditional ways. And she always taught me that Western medicine always looked at the physical aspect, so it was always like a pill or a treatment that was gonna solve the problem or heal you. And she says we have to go much deeper. We have to look at, our emotional, mental, and spiritual ways, because that's all part of balance in our health. And so she went through the InMed program at the University of North Dakota and graduated in the 80s. And I remember going to her graduation, and I was so proud of her. And I looked up to her, and I thought, I want to be just like my auntie. Well, fast forward, she went back to her communities to, serve her people, because that's what she wanted to do. And all of a sudden, my family is like, yeah, Auntie's taking a break from, practicing medicine. And I thought, well, gosh, why is she doing that? And I asked her, Auntie, how come, you're stepping away from medicine? And she says, well, Claude, I'm not going to step away from medicine. I just need to take a break because, I see patients day after day in my community, and I would say, what are you coming in for today? And they'd say, this issue or that issue. And she said, from my doctor's side, what I was taught in school, I was told, give this pill or this treatment. And so that's what I would do. But then I'd see them come back like a week later or a couple weeks later with the same condition, or it exacerbated into something worse. And she thought, I need to bring back our holistic way and our tradition. So she took a break, she got a grant, and she ended up studying like how she could incorporate more of the holistic approach to how she treated her patients. And so she ended up doing that for a couple years, and then she came back and she was able to incorporate those practices into how she worked with her patients. And that was 30 years ago, and we're still in this place of like trying to incorporate our traditional ways and to make people understand that the westernized way is not the only way. Like, there's all aspects of healing that are involved, for us. So I'll be happy to go back and share with her that we, are making some headway on this, and we have some positive things going on in our communities, and at the federal level to kind of recognize this. So I don't think she knew it, but she was probably one of the original trailblazers in helping to move this forward.
Thank you. Well, I'll go to Mr. John Eagleshield. I'll read the question again. It's, what are your experiences or opinions might be for good examples of best practices?
Okay, thank you. I was the director of our tribal community health program for 35 years on Standing Rock. And through the years, I've become to recognize myself as a community activist. And some of the things that I saw, that I see today that are really needed, when the day comes that we have traditional practitioners in our IHS hospitals, I see, or I envision the physician recognizing and supporting and treating that traditional practitioner as a full partner. If a patient has an ailment, the Western physician will prescribe medication, pills, or whatever. Our traditional people will also do herbs, other kinds of medicines, most of all spiritual. We do not have that at this point. And that's what's needed for recognition of our traditional people. And and that includes those institutions that we refer our patients out to, especially in Bismarck or Rapid City or Sioux Falls or wherever. They do not have, how would you say, cultural sensitivity. They make millions off of Indian Health Service. They make millions off of Indian ailments, but they have no cultural sensitivity. And one of the things that I always like to tell that kind of emphasizes that, we had in Bismarck, we had, and there are many others, but we had one young man. He was admitted to have a shunt put in his arm prior to dialysis. And if you're Lakota, your family is concerned about you, so they go with you. They all went to the hospital, and they're in the waiting room. And security came and says, there are too many of you Indians here, so you'll have to leave. So they all got up and they left the waiting room. And he said, if my family has to leave, then I'm going to leave too. So he got up and he got dressed and walked out. And then he didn't last too much longer after that. So we really do need something where institutions recognize traditional tribal medicine. And I understand that there are 4 states that are going to be the pilot program. And then when it does come to the Northern Plains, to South Dakota, that in itself will be a big difficulty because of the politics for the state of South Dakota. But when it does, I have a fear In this day and age, my question will always be, who's going to quantify them, the traditional medicine? Who's going to qualify them? How are they going to be recognized? Will physicians and hospital administration actually want to work with our traditional people? And my biggest fear is that in this day and age, all the new age self-appointed medicine people, spiritual people, make-believe, fake medicine men are going to come out of the woodwork because they know there's going to be some money made there. So again, who's going to quantify them? Who's going to qualify them? Are there going to be medicine men's associations, or are you going to take the tribal word on that? All too often, those playing the field, you got CMS, you got IHS, you got the states, but tribes are not involved. And we need to change that. And like I said, when the day comes, hopefully that's all in place, but that's my biggest fear right now.
Thank you, Mr. John Eagleshield, Senior. Thank you for those comments, Dr. Adamson and Dr. Kelleher. So the next question I have is I think Mr. Eagleshield answered a lot of these, the second question about, are there things that could be done better regarding best practices? I think he spoke a lot to those. It comes along the lines of like cultural humility and cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness, those three main things, as well as I think one of the biggest things that Native people, we got to recognize the need for empathy, right? We need to think, we don't need another, Natives don't need another savior person to come in and save. We got to save ourselves, but we have to give the tools and have the recognition that we have those things at our disposal, but be supported. So that question I have, what can be done better regarding best practices? I think Mr. Eagleshield set the foundation for that answer. So if you guys could build upon that, and we'll go with Dr. Keller first. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I feel like it's important to acknowledge that educating people, especially providers and health systems, about the ecosystem of traditional healing, what it is, and the ways in which it is valuable would be helpful. The challenge there is that we're very early in the science. So for example, I've recently been writing a scoping review that looks at over 2,000 articles about traditional healing and behavioral health. 160 of those articles were about traditional healing and behavioral health, and 60% of them, by far, most of them showed that traditional healing incorporated into clinical settings is of benefit, but also very few studies include traditional healer perspectives, and very few studies like the actual healers themselves, right? So we don't have much of a voice, and also providers are not often involved in the studies and the science. So I feel like we do have successful programs, but sometimes we still don't have the awareness of the value of the medicine. So I feel that's a gap that could be filled, and part of the reason that I am now a researcher instead of only in clinical practice is to help bring voice to traditional healers and that process. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Dr. Adamson.
So I agree, but not just looking at those who will be performing the traditional healing services, but then also providers that come into our communities from the outside. I think that there needs to be a way to kind of train them and have them kind of connect with our communities and learn more about the members who they're serving, and have it not be about, I have to fulfill this requirement to get loan forgiveness to serve underserved populations for 2-3 years, and they're in and out. I think there needs to be a lot more collaboration and partnership where they're working with the community and just learning more about us, because how could you provide healing or treatments for our people if you don't understand our communities? And then kind of just going off in a little bit different direction, we had another panelist who was scheduled to be with us, and we kind of heard her story about her programs and how she was connecting the youth with different programs with traditional dance and language. And, we talked about intergenerational trauma and how that's passed down into our DNA and it's imprinted in our DNA. So, healing doesn't only happen in the healthcare facility or the hospitals, it happens in our communities, and we heard a lot about that today. I think, we have to look at, some of these agencies that provide resources and funding for education, like Bureau of Indian Education and such, still investing resources and money for our schools to continue those programs, to build those programs. I remember when I was a young girl, we had those programs in our schools. We had a language program. We'd have elders come in and tell us traditional stories, and then even tell us stories about their lives when they were younger. And I feel like, that's a part of our healing, is to be connected with our identity, our traditions, and it should start at a young age in our communities, and we should continue that and have that going. So when Lana was telling us that she's doing that as a Head Start director in her community, it really resonated with me, because I thought to myself, gosh, we need to have that in our communities again, and to have that support from these agencies that provide, funding and resources, because we had a bilingual program, and I don't know how many of our tribal communities have that anymore, that support, but I think that needs to be recognized, because like I said, it's a part of our healing as well, and it starts at a young age.
Thank you, Mr. Eagleshield.
Excuse me. I was raised by my grandparents, and as such, I never had a childhood, so I was a young elder early. And the things that I learned from them, my grandmother is a survivor of Carlisle. She came home, but she still kept her traditions. And that's how I kind of got to where I am today. She was 9 years old when they killed Sitting Bull, and she saw that. And every day she would tell the story, and she would cry. And then she'd remember some more, and then she would cry. So as a result of that, over the many years, I don't feel that I inherited any kind of historical trauma or intergenerational grief, because she healed herself. And I never passed that on to my children. And I never passed that on to my grandchildren. So there's a certain aspect there that we all need to kind of consider how long this has been. One of the things I do believe, if this is going to happen, or should I say when it's going to happen, it all needs to be community-based. I mean, there's plans for making a new hospital on Standing Rock, and coming from the community health perspective, I believe a lot of the healing will happen in the community, in the home, and we'll all be better for it. And again, like I said, my fear is that the new agers will come in and they'll say, I'm going to pump you full of sunshine and fresh air and you'll be well, It doesn't work that way. You have to bring a certain amount of integrity with you, language, customs, traditions, that people understand of you. I got to compliment The St. Alexis Hospital in Bismarck, over the years of dealing with them, they were really receptive to us, our community health program. They're the only hospital that I know of that has dedicated a particular room for meditation. They recircled the ventilation system so you can burn sage and cedar and sweetgrass and you'll take it outside. They made the room soundproof so you can have singing and drumming in there. And even the entryway was made by a local artist. His name is Bush Thunderhawk, and he did a stained glass native motif to the doorway. And that's the only one that I know of in the whole area that really made the effort to reach the community. Even our own service units do not do that. So we have a certain amount of cultural sensitivity that needs to happen, even amongst our own, before that can happen.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle Shield. So we had a really good response to that question because I think it really spoke to the children, right? Our next generation, the seventh generation that currently exists. So being a sixth generation descendant from Chief Don like myself, I really appreciate Mr. Eagle Shield speaking about how his grandmother healed from that trauma and not passing down that blood memory to his kids. And we have to meet our people where they are, right? Because not every tribe is different. Every tribe has their own experience. Every family has their own experience. They may not be there at the healing part yet. So we have to recognize that. I think that sensitivity and that awareness from a provider's perspective, coming in like, I'm gonna solve all your problems. I know what's best for you because I read your history in a book, but they don't have that lived experience. They don't have that blood trauma or that generational knowledge they carry with them. So having those types of conversations, I think, as tribal leaders, as you hear from these traditional healers, you can't heal somebody if you're not healed yourself completely, right? So that is why an hour like Mr. Eagle Show is so valuable to our indigenous communities and these other healers as well. They've done some healing within themselves because they carry this, it's about healing that trauma and being able to serve other people. So with that, I want to ask our third question. We have more questions as well, so very good discussion going on right now. How does tribal sovereignty relate to best practices in traditional healing as it is today? So, Dr. Kelleher, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. Tribal sovereignty, I feel, has everything to do with traditional healing implementation because in that there are over 700 tribes, right? 574 federally recognized, but really quite a diversity. And within each of our communities, we have our own practices. And of course, each of us as traditional healers further are trained as individuals. So we don't, as far as I know, have a standardized training for traditional healers. Thus, our communities can afford us that title of traditional healers. I'll also say that to my knowledge, there are at least two main types of traditional healers. There are traditional healers in their natural environment, in doing their healing in their communities, and then there are also what to me seems like a new type of traditional healer, which is integrated into health systems and has that ability to liaise between the two. So tribal sovereignty allows us to help define our definitions, I think, in the clinical and health settings as far as what we would like to see in our traditional healers and how maybe they could be trained or to what standards we'd like to hold them. But the other side of that is allowing us to have the flexibility within the systems to allow the sovereignty to exist, right? So we need flexibility with evaluation frameworks. We need indigenous evaluation frameworks built into our health systems federally. And so stay tuned, we're working on it. Merci.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'll answer this question the best, but I'll try. So I think, with our tribal sovereignty, I'll probably go a little bit of a different direction. So, essentially, we should have the control to govern and control how healthcare is delivered to us, because we know our people, we know what's most effective. I mean, we're proving that now. But, like Dr. Wilson mentioned early this morning, it's a data-driven world, and, we have to go around that way, I guess, to get funding or resources. So we need to collect data and then prove, like, these are our health issues, or this is the highest priority need, and then, you get the funding or the resources to start to plan to start addressing those needs, those healthcare needs. So I think that's one thing, like with our tribal communities, is that, we need to have better access to our data that's collected on us, because if we don't, how are we supposed to, identify those areas or plan better? I mean, we do a needs assessment every 3 years with our tribal elders through the Title VI programs, and we've done papers where it talks about the data shows that the elder, the ones that had high cultural participation, they had better health outcomes. They had less cognitive issues. So we have some data to prove that, but we could always use more data to support and provide that evidence. So, agencies recognizing, I mean, it's starting, some do better than others, but to recognize that we should control and govern our own data and have access to that data to provide that evidence that's required. Another thing is, in these grants, and I think it was talked about earlier, is that they're always like, why don't tribes apply for this grant or that grant? We want them to apply, but then you have these certain stipulations and these standards they're held to, and you got to pick from a list of evidence-based practices or evidence-based studies, programs, I'm sorry, not studies, but programs that they have to utilize. Well, then, who are they evidence-based for? Are they evidence-based for us? Because I'll guarantee you that there's probably a very small percentage, if any, of our people that participated in those studies to make that curriculum evidence-based. So why do we have to fit into their box or to meet their expectations? They should be trying to work with us to, make our curriculums or our homegrown programs that we've utilized, that we know that work, where we could use those. And so I think that's kind of, a challenge, with these grant requirements having to use what they deem as an evidence-based and that Western side approach. So I think that needs to change. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much more that I could talk about, I guess, with this, but those are just a few things that I think, need to change to better recognize our sovereignty and giving us more control and power over what happens with our people.
I agree with you. I see two things that need to be clarified regarding tribal sovereignty. We do not have the adequate personnel in all of our service units. One of the attempts that Standing Rock made at one time, in order to retain doctors and nurses, we wanted to give them free housing. We wanted to give them bonuses to entice them to stay longer or to live in the community, and other little enticements, free hunting licenses and fishing and all that kind of stuff. But IHS says, no, there's a cap on everything. You can't give them any more of a wage than what they're making now, and they have to live in IHS housing, but they don't. They live in Bismarck, and it takes a good hour, 15 minutes, or hour 20 minutes to get down to get to work. The other one I see is regarding recognition of traditional practitioners. One of the things, again, I do believe that our people need to be the ones to decide who those are. Because a lot of times we get people from other areas that say, I'm a medicine man and I'm here to help and all that, but we don't know them. There's an expression in Lakota, Oyatik ishta na nuche yuchampelo, meaning that our people have eyes and our people have ears. So no matter how well you present yourself or how well you carry yourself, people are going to always know you. They're going to know what you did or did not do, what you said or what you did not say. And the tribe needs to be able to make that decision based on what we would consider. We have three. One is foundation of language, values, morals that the people can see. And without that, it's not going to work. So those two issues on tribal sovereignty, I see that.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle Shield. Good conversation, good discussion around sovereignty and how it plays into traditional healing. I think one of the biggest things I know I've been hearing a lot is how do we determine, how do the tribes self-determine, right? What a traditional healer is. I think that came out of earlier conversations because we have some non-natives out there that may be appropriating some of these ways, and we got to safeguard some of these traditional ways of practicing and healing. We're not going to write things down or record some of these songs that are meant for healing, some of these practices. They're safeguarded by our tribes. That makes them unique in that sense. So they should determine who carries on these practices, but maybe through an apprenticeship that they determine how they make it. Maybe it's familial, lineal. Maybe it's through a society or some type of internal organization unique to that tribe. So those are things that I think really help affirm the tribal sovereignty piece around traditional healing, not what the government may say or some entity may say. This is how you determine who your healers are. It should be determined by the tribes. So with that, I did want to go to another discussion. I know we exhausted our questions, but we had a good planning session the past few weeks, and one of the questions I wanted to ask, I think this came up in an earlier discussion, probably from one of the Indian health boards. I don't want to call anybody out, but around programs like grant funding. A lot of the traditional healers, how they're able to provide these services rely heavily on grant funding, and not because they're not able to be reimbursed. Even though there's pilots going on right now, but collectively across the country, there's not a way to reimburse tribal healers, and the burden is really on the process about evaluation. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Kelleher to talk about the evaluation piece. I think we talked about this earlier, and share a little bit about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the question is about evaluation for spiritual evaluation. Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So as a multidimensional being, there are so many different aspects to being a human, but one of the things that's important about being a Native person is our spirituality. And this is a hard thing to measure, but there are tools and there has been progress made in this regard. For example, there's a tool called the Wachosani instrument that is a tool that integrates this question about spirituality and your spiritual well-being. It seems like a simple concept, but it's a very powerful tool. And so we're using some of those tools. We're using the Wachosani instrument in a diabetes study currently in in the Great Plains, a project based out of Oyate Health Center in Rapid. And so I think that Wachosani instrument is a great example of some of the progress that's being made in science and in health systems. And I hope that's helpful, and I'm so grateful. Thanks for the reminder. And I'm happy to hear other thoughts also. Masi, Koyana.
Dr. Adamson, do you have anything to add?
I guess not so much on the evaluation piece, but I did want to I wanted to go back to what John was talking about. I wanted to say that, we were having this conversation last night at dinner, and, I think that the concerns are legitimate with, I think it's great that we have this 1115 waiver and that 4 states are going to start being able to do the traditional healing, and it's going to be reimbursable. But I think, John makes a good point that we do need to kind of protect our tribal communities, because there's people who could come out and take advantage of that. So I think that, like you said, like all of this discussion, I feel like one central theme is like our communities. Like, we're the ones that, our people are the ones, the tribal members need to be the ones to guide all of this work and what we do. And I think that's the whole point of this, right? Is that we need to have our voice heard in a lot of this planning, and not for it to be planned for us or told, hey, this is what's gonna be best for you and this is the way you need to do it, but to talk to our community members and, to have an advisory council of our elders and, for them to guide some of this. And, even maybe it means that we have to have, like, once the elder council identifies who the traditional healers are that could be reimbursable, maybe it has to be passed by a tribal resolution that these are the only people identified in our community that can, serve as traditional healers for this effort. But I think it all comes down to all of this is we have to have the answers come from our community, and they have to have a voice and be involved.
Thank you. Anything to add, Mr. Eagleshield?
I still agree with you. One of the things, if we have a practitioner working alongside the doctor, then I believe they should get the same salary. So I'll expect $100,000 next time I'm up there. Our traditional leaders have a unique link to spiritual things. So on one hand, we look towards healing rather than curing. And healing, it's kind of all-encompassing. We use herbs, we use songs, and my son was pointing out to me that if you make wahwe, or a tea, and the patient drinks that, on one hand, it's just tea. But in the traditional sense, because of the prayer and the spirituality that goes with it, that will heal the person. And that isn't easy to come by. As I said before, there are certain prayers, there are certain songs, there are certain other things that go along with it that I don't know how you're going to measure. For example, my grandfather cured a Korean veteran that came back. He was machine gunned on his mid-stomach area. And he was cured, but he wasn't healed. Every day he felt pain. So my grandfather told him, you need to go out and find some clean dirt. And in our way, the clean dirt is if you ever seen molehills. that dirt from molehills just fine. So he had him lay on that, and he covered him up. And then he spent the night there with him. He prayed for him. He sang for him. He cried for him. And he got better. So how can clean dirt heal? Those are the things that a lot of people do not understand. And I don't know how you're going to evaluate that. But nonetheless, the patient is healed. So we think about that all the time. It's common for us to do that. And there, again, there are a lot of stories for that too.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle Shield. Thank you for these responses. Very impactful. I think the audience here could probably agree to hearing these things are valuable. Even hearing this is medicine. It's healing for everybody that's probably come from a tribal community. Just seeing and hear how unique these experiences are and perspectives. We tend to think that medicine is something that we take, or we cure something, that person should be fine. But healing and being healthy is more than just the physical or even just the mental, because you need the spirit, you need to be all three, right? Our Cheyenne, I know that we talk about going into the next world, but we have to be whole. Being whole is not just physically, but whole within our minds and our spirit, and know where we come from, because know where we're going to in the next world. So with that, are there any questions from the audience?
You know, for my part, I'll close here, but you know, humor is a good part of healing too. True story here. My father, he in 1980 he had a massive stroke, and most of the time people don't survive. They put him in a nursing home, and my mother went to visit him, and she kidnapped him, took him home, and he survived 14 years because he had family, he had friends, he had relatives that came to visit him every day. Towards the end there, he was getting a little more infections all the time, and his time was due, and he knew it. So one day he said, Chinksha, he honey, let you heal in the He said, son, he said, I want you to, he was in a nursing home. He said, son, come on, early in the morning, I want you to see how they treat me. So I got there, and I got there just in time where they sat him up on the bed, and they were going to take his gown off and change him and get him ready for breakfast. So he started leaning, and that quick they put him, got him, swiveled him around, put him on a wheelchair, took him to breakfast. And then after breakfast, they wheeled him out to the great room, and where he was watching TV or news, and he started to lean again. So they came quickly, and they put pillows beside him, and a little while later he went the other way. He was leaning, so they put a belt around him. And he said, do you see that? Do you see what they did to me? He said, they don't even let you fart around here, he said. But he healed us, hearing that from him, you know. So along with all the spirituality, humor, and Indians are known for their humor, and that's healing.
Thank you for that story. You're absolutely correct about that. Natives are known to be very humorous. I think there's a whole Native comedian movement going on. So I'm sure there's probably been a few moderators at some of your HHS conferences and other meetings. I'm sure look forward to those coming up in the next calendar year, right? So I'm sure we all need that because laughter is healing, and we can never take ourselves too seriously, right? That's kind of the thing. If you're a little too serious, then that's a sign. Maybe you need to lighten up and, let yourself laugh a little. Laugh at yourself sometimes. Anyway, so I'd like to thank our panelists here. Very good discussion, very good panel. I'm really blessed, very fortunate to be part of these conversations with 3 Indigenous healers and leaders in their tribal communities, and our very special elder here that we have the privilege of being a part of this panel. So thank you all.
Damon, I had a question for the panel members.
Okay, I'm sorry. Question?
I'm right here. It's me, Selena.
Oh, hey, Selena.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Selena Corradi. I work at NIH. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, and I'm from a place called Manuelito, New Mexico, which is 16 miles west of Gallup. So I just had a question for the traditional healers, and a lot of our patients from back home on the Navajo reservation, they get flown out like to Banner Hospital or to University of New Mexico, or either to Denver to get services. And I'm just going to use an example of my mom. This happened to my mom a couple years ago. She broke her femur, and she was flown to a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. So, I was there with her, and I sought a traditional medicine healer from home. And the medicine person told me, I'm going to go ahead and sing for her and do a prayer for her using my cell phone. And an endocrinologist came in and was really upset at me because of what I was doing. So I guess the question that I have is that a lot of our patients get flown to other hospitals. We don't only use IHS facility, we use non-IHS facilities. How do we work with doctors there that are really culturally sensitive to traditional medicine? That's my question.
Well, I'll ask one of our panelists if they can answer that, and I'll offer my own perspective after. I'll pass it to the panelists, and either one of you guys, have the elder go first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In our experience in North Dakota, we made an effort to contact the 2 medical centers up there, and we asked to meet with the medical staff. And similar to this, we sat around and we tried to tell them who we were, what our needs were, what our preferences were, and how we would like to see our people treated here. And for the most part, they were most respectful. And like I said, that's how that meditation room at St. Alexis Hospital in Bismarck was constructed. On the other hand, they don't stay around too long either. The doctors, they move from job to job, and they move to other places, and same thing with the nursing staff, and same thing with the head staff that admit people. They all change. They're not constant. So it's a needed ritual that we need to go through to go visit them and talk to them and tell them what our needs are to make us better.
Masi Koyana, I really appreciate the answer and also the question. I just want to say that it saddens me terribly to hear this story, but also I can relate on so many levels. Part of the reason I'm a physician is in order to advocate in situations like this, and until we get the problem fixed, I think that just being an advocate as best you can in visiting our relatives in clinical settings is an imperative. So my heart goes out to you and your family and all of those who are trying to access traditional healing services.
part of the initiative that we've undertaken at the Indigenous Healers and Educators Alliance. It's called I Heal. It's a national movement of educators. We're advocating for all medical schools to teach doctors the value of Indigenous cultural practices and to outline information that should be taught in every medical school. My hope is that this initiative won't be only limited to medical schools, and ultimately that we'll create an Indigenous School of Healing Arts. We're starting with an Indigenous School of Medicine so that we can train in a way that heals our healers and allows us to bring medicine to the future the way that it should be and is intended to be from our hearts. So my hope is that over time, that Indigenous perspectives will be centered and acknowledged as important, and I'm just terribly saddened to hear that we continue to experience harmful things in places of healing or places that are called hospitals, right? So really, our health system in our country is not a health system, it's actually a sick care system. So we have a lot of work to do, but I'm so grateful for the question, and I hope that answer is helpful in some way, that we are working for systems change nationally and internationally. We have an initiative through the Indigenous Determinants of Health Alliance showing that though 6% of the world's population is indigenous, we care for 80% of the biodiversity on the planet. And our health and our practices are super important for the rest of the globe, for all people's wellness, and especially for the wellness of our climate and our environment. So it's high time that, that we're listened to, and I think better together. So I'm so grateful to see all of you here, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Masi, Quiana.
Thank you. Do you have a response?
I can't really speak from like a traditional healer MD perspective, but just, you know, in our area, I live in the Grand Forks area, and I know like even 10 years ago, and I agree, I mean, we should have those options in our hospitals out of our tribal communities. And I think, you know, I agree, you know, advocacy, but we do, about 10 years ago or so, one of the hospitals ended up having a traditional healer consultant, so they were actually part of the care team. I believe they had 2 on staff. I think there was one in South Dakota and then one in Fargo, North Dakota. Actually, I think Dr. Warren was one of the consultants for that with Sanford. So I think just, you know, that advocacy, but like meeting with some of those hospitals to kind of say why this is important, and, you know, just advocating to have those options for our people from our tribal communities, because, you know, quite honestly, there could be situations where some of our people, that could be their first time outside of our tribal communities in a health facility, especially for our elders, where, you know, the family, it would be tough for them to go out and visit, or if they do, like, not being able to do their traditional practices or have that option to heal the person, I think, you know, is just not a good situation. And so, yeah, I mean, I would just say, you know, kind of advocating for that and making these hospitals aware that that's really important, especially in areas where there's a larger, you know, tribal populations.
My hope is that the Indian Health Service will work with those bigger hospitals and, you know, to bring awareness to the doctors. And I really love the idea about the care team. You know, there's usually so when somebody gets admitted, there's a social service, there's a doctor, you know, the nurse and others that come and provide that care. And I think having a traditional person, a medicine person there to be part of that team would be really awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, well, thank you for the question, and I thank again to the panelists for hanging on for that last question. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Captain Killsback, Dr. Kelleher, Director Adamson, and Mr. Eagleshield for sharing your best practices and culturally responsive services. We sure did learn a lot, and we appreciate your sharing of your knowledge as well as your generosity of your time. So at this point, we're going to get into our last panel of the day, which is Holistic Support for Maternal Health. I will be moderated by Dr. Carmela Roybal, the Senior Advisor, who was up here earlier and moderated our first panel. Dr. Roybal will be introducing her panelists, and she'll be, and I'll briefly introduce them now, but she'll be joined by her panelists, Director Elena Eagleshield, Ms. Iktomi Washde-Wiafavo, and Ms. Faith Spotted Eagle. So let's all welcome them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. How's everybody feeling? That didn't sound so good. How's everybody feeling right now? I don't know how everyone's feeling. All right, we're here, and this is a very special time in history, and being able to be in this position and being able to come together and talk about and lay a lot of these things out on the table around our health, the health of our nations, the health of our lands, our water, and all of the different pieces that contribute to the future of our tribal populations. And you know, if we haven't said it, a lot of our tribes are in an existential crisis. We're seeing very, very, very stark drops in maternal health and all of our fertility rates and all sorts of different that are really contributing to the downsizing of nations. So one really important piece that we're going to talk about today is maternal health, and where traditional notions of health and well-being are incorporated. And these technologies, when we talk about, and I call them technologies because these traditions and other pieces have been part of culture and have been part of the world as we know it for thousands of years. And so I'd like to welcome these really special guests. We're going to make this a little interactive, and I'm really going to ask them to do a small introduction of some of their themselves, and then something they're really proud of. And then we're going to dive into what does maternal prenatal care from a traditional perspective, and why is it so important? You can look right now at any of the data talking about maternal health trends for American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and you're going to see how the rates, right, the mortality rates that we're facing. You're also going to see that the majority of those deaths are preventable deaths. You're also going to see that many of them are post, right? A woman has given birth and they're related to mental health and substance use related disorders and other pieces. So all of these different related to land, trauma, the reduction of our ability to care for our most vulnerable, our infants, the unborn, and those that are coming in. And so today we're going to have a discussion connecting all of those different pieces together. And I'm going to start here with Iktomi to my left. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and just a little bit of your background.
Sure. I kind of feel like Tui should introduce herself first. Okay.
We're saving the
best for last.
The best for last. So.
Yes. Hamidakiapi, Tayawanchia kapi, Iktomi Washtemia Fable, Ka Chanku Toya Emakiapie, Washichu Chaje Beduha Shni, Wakia Jayamani Beduha, Mihunka Ke Susie Crow, Donna Albers Walking Elk, Ka Mitch Walking Elk, Iwichakiapie, Imnija Ska Mini Shota Hemataha, Kangi Wakba Oyanke Ed Omamapi Ye. My name is Iktomi Washdewiya Fable. It means good spider woman. I also said I don't have a white name. And I have 3 daughters. My mom is Susie Crow, Donna Albers Walking Elk, and Mitch Walking Elk. And I live in St. Paul, and I'm enrolled in the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe. Pidamia.
Kundawaha, thank you. And we'll go to Elena.
Midakiapi, Elena Eagle Show de Machiapi, Iu Hachante Washte na Pe Chusapi, was the Acta Lakota Makocheki, na Iwaslata Kichta Haska Mataha, Michinchaki Zapta, Tawicha Waki Hila, Atewayaki, John Eagle Shield Senior, Chiapi, Naha, Inawayaki, Valerie Eagle Shield de Chiapi, Na Mahasani, Red Rock Perkins de Chiapi. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Elena Eagleshield, and I am from the Standing Rock Nation, also the 3 affiliated tribes. I grew up on Standing Rock. I am married to Red Rock Perkins, and we have 5 beautiful children. And one thing I'm very proud of is that my kids come from a really safe and loving home.
Kundawaha, thank you. And now we're very fortunate and very blessed to have Faith Spotted Eagle here with us today. So, go ahead, Faith.
Tojan you piakid. Ake wachianka. Ake dem petuki you piakid on petu duta wanji uyakupi heche na pechius papi. El ospaya mitawa nina ota buduha tokahe ihanktoa na sichangu na hunkpati na bede wakantuya ka cheese china hunk papa. Cheese china. Na wakanja mitaki nu buduhaga takoja mitaki yamani. Deam petuki el yushke uhipi ash doksha taki pinkta ka you piakid nija yahipi mitaki api.
Thank you. And I want to get this correct, but Faith is one of 3 women to receive an Electoral College vote for president in the United States. Okay.
I should have ran this year.
So not only did she has a long career really fighting for clean water and community in so many spaces, really leading a lot of the efforts that we've read about in the headlines and all of that. So I just want to thank you for being here and taking time to spend with us and have this conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to start with the land. We're going to start with the land and what the relationship that it has to maternal health and its importance.
Toja, I'm going to defer to the younger women here because I have a lot to learn. And if you let me talk, I'll take up the whole time. So I'm going to be humble. And
Sounds good. Let's go.
use the remaining time.
I guess how I look at our women is how I look at Mother Earth. So I do a lot of birth work, and I guess you could call me a doula. I also an apprenticing midwife. And when I'm working with our families and our women, I always start with our creation story. And sometimes I work with women that aren't my tribe, and so I'll seek out a creation story. I'll ask them to go and seek out their creation story because it really mimics how we are as human, how we are as a woman. And a lot of those things that happen during creation happen over and over and over again throughout life and are happening right now. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And we come from Unchimaka. And we're going to go back to her. We're made from her. We're made from the stars. So it's, we're her. So it kind of just makes sense to tie them together.
I think my dad was earlier talking about clean dirt, and that's such like a funny way to put it. But we were taught by actually Lekshi Tim Mentz, his kunshitku is Zintkana Shawi, and she taught him about, she was a Dakota midwife from Standing Rock, and she shared with him about a term called makagana, when the baby is born and you get clean dirt. And they would do it outside. Our babies were born connecting to earth in that way. And so now, because of the ways that, we birth in hospitals or we birth at home. I've birthed 3 of my 5 babies at home, and we were able to bring in the clean dirt and to think about what that means for the baby to, touch the dirt mixed with amniotic fluid and make that instant connection to earth and to carry that with them for, the rest of their lives. Getting emotional. My newest baby's 2 months old, almost 3 months old, and he's our last baby that we, were able to have that ceremony with, and so he's connected to earth early on.
Are we answering about the land and earth? Is that what? Okay.
Whatever you want to share, yeah.
Okay, so I'll just do a little bit and then respond to your questions because I got a lot to say. So you always probably hear us say that we were raised by our grandma, but that's because our kunshis were PhDs. They were PhDs in everything, especially dirt. But my dirt story is when I was about 6 years old. And we were hauling water. We went down to the Wakpana, the creek, and a very hot day, and so I'm following kunshi. I was a good little grandma's girl most of the time, until I was a teenager. But anyway, we went down to the water, and she said, Iotaka, sit down beside me. So good little girl, I went over there and I plopped down beside her, and it was really hot. And she said she always had a wapakta. She always had a little bundle on her belt. So she dug it out and took forever to undo it. And she took it out, and then she had a little mina, a little knife. And she took that mina and she cut out 2 clods on this bank. And so she said, Ichu, wana wota. So she handed me the little clod. I was glad she gave me the little one, but she took the big one. And so she sat there and she went like this, and I think I might have been 4 actually. And so she started eating it. She'd take a bite and then she'd eat it, and I was watching her, and she looked at me and she said, Wota. And so I started eating my clod of dirt, sitting with my kunshi, like we did that every day. But I asked her, I said, Doko dechonkope, why are we doing this? And she said, there's things in there that Wakantanka says that you need, and the kunshis need that. And so I said, oh, good, I'm going to go over here and get some over here. And she said, Hiya, Iotaka. She said, you can't do this anywhere. You have to, this is the place-based knowledge that we have. She knew where the okay places were to eat dirt. And so we don't even know that. And we don't even eat dirt anymore. You can't, because it's full of pesticides. And so I think that's some of my Dekshi Vine Deloria. How many of you have read Uncle Vine's writings? Raise your hand. Well, the rest of you need to raise your hands and read it. But he's one of our foremost scholars that talks about a lot of things about metaphysics. And when he talks about metaphysics, he talks about the instructions that we have that all of us need to possess to be able to understand the places that we live. That's place-based knowledge. So if you live along the Potomac River, obviously you're not going to be able to drink or be by that water. That's going to form your next 7 generations, and it's not in a good way. And so the place-based knowledge that we have really frames the network. I heard a lot of you talking about a generic form of traditional healing knowledge. It's not generic. It's related to where I grew up, where she grew up, where she grew up. So you can't Western model it. You have to be able to have respect for where that shkan came from. You call it quantum physics, we call it shkan, and that's what that metaphysics is. Another something that I want to mention for nature or the world that we live in with metaphysics, and it's about sacred arithmetic. So my kunshi that I was raised with, she's a child of a massacre, and I'm a grandchild of a massacre. Her grandmother killed a soldier and took his horse and took her and her 2 brothers, or else I wouldn't be here. So growing up with that direct informant knowledge, it was urgent that we learn these things. So when my kunshi, her daughter, was going to make her spirit journey, she stayed with us till the very end, and then there were medical things that we couldn't do, so we put her in a nursing home, which was very close to our home, so we just go over there back and forth. But that morning, the nurse called me, and she said, you better get over here. Her feet are changing color, and I think it's time. So we all ran over there, and so I went in, and kunshi, or my tui was laying there, and she was looking up, and she said, "Ma, matoska wanji wanahi." She said, "White bear's come. He's right up there." And she said, "He came after me." And so then I said, "What is he saying?" And she looked at me and she said, "That's for me to know, not you." And so I was trying to pump her for knowledge. And she said, she said, Ina lived to be 104. This is sacred arithmetic. She said she lived to be 104, and I'm going to get to 105. So even on her deathbed, she was telling me that she was going to reach 105. So she's starting to go, and she sees all the spirits coming to get her, and she's naming them off. And then she took her last breath, and then she was gone, and we were singing and singing for her way back, and the nurse came up, and she grabbed her pulse, and she said, "Time of death, 105. So she did get to 105. So that was physics. She told us she was going to, and she left at 105. And to me, that's a gift and a marvel. And for you, probably in Western science, you think, oh, the clock stopped or something happened or whatever, trying to explain it away. But there are so many physics happening in our world that what you document in your studies may not take place in the place that you want it to take place, in that hospital, in that room, or wherever, because it's place-based knowledge. And I know that because, and I'll stop here after I mention it, but I've had two very eventful gifts in my life. Oh, I've had many, my grandchildren, my children, but I'm a cancer survivor of 30 years. And it was in 1994. And no medical people could tell me that. I tried to tell them. I was in Seattle, Washington, and I was walking down the street. I was crazy back then, and I did 4 days of workshop, healing. That's too much for one person. I thought I was Wonder Woman back then. But I heard a scream inside of my body, and I thought, oh, what is that? And then I got dizzy, and I thought, there's something wrong with me. And so I finished the workshop, went back to Spokane, and I told the doctor, my provider, I said, there's something wrong with me. And he said, can you tell me the symptoms? And I said, I heard a scream. And of course, that was probably not the right way to start, but we progressed. This happened in September, October, November, December, January, February, March. And by the end of February, he said, I'm going to refer you to a psychiatrist. And I said, why? And he said, I think it's in your head. And I said, well, I hope it's not that far yet. Whatever it is, we need to find out. And so then he was exasperated with me at that point. So I went home. That night I was sitting on the couch, and I went like this, and I could feel it. And it hadn't been there before. The mammograms. I had 3 mammograms, and it didn't show up. So right away the next morning, I went down to Sacred Heart, and he looked at me, and he said, not you again. And I said, it's right here. It's right here. And he felt it. He said, And so we went through the MRI, and he said that the tumor had hidden behind some swelling in the tubular structure, and so they couldn't see it. And so long story short, I had 6 months of chemo, I had breast cancer, and the very first thing that I did this morning, somebody mentioned about the ceremonies, before even going further with that doctor that I had to take 5 months to convince, I went to ceremony. And some very miraculous things came in that ceremony, and I knew I was going to be okay. But I had a beautiful oncologist that told me, and this is speaking about being a mother, she said, you have small children, so I'm going to recommend, she said, I think we got it, but I'm going to recommend chemo because there might be a stray cancer cell going around. And I said, okay, I'm up for it. And I didn't realize what that statement meant, but 6 months later, I did finish that, and by the grace of Creator, I'm still here. And then the second event was I had a near-death experience. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this stage in our lives, it's like kindergarten. I feel like, but that's exciting because when you're in kindergarten, you have a lot to learn, right? And so I did. I went to the other side. My kushis that were also older called me back. And I saw very many beautiful things that I think are metaphysical. They're shka in our language. Some can't be translated. But I think the creation that is sent, those babies that come, that these girls are talking about, they come from the Big Dipper because we're star people. And they have to require tender care. but our health system is broke. And for many years, I was a organizational development trainer. 90% of the problem is in the system. We have a huge 90% problem, and on the reservations, it's 200%, because nothing trickles down. So if we could think about how do we create this template to change a system that is very violent. And we all have a divine plan, so let's get our divine plans together to make that change. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, you ready for me? Okay, thank you. No, thank you very much for that. And this is really powerful for everyone here to hear, because right now we're thinking about how do we reshape maternal care? How do we provide? So can anybody in the room tell me when obstetrics has a field? It's very new. All of this, all of the birthing practices, it was removed from the homes and put into a clinic, into 4 walls. And here we have specialists training and learning to remove that from those walls and put it back in the homes so that we can have healthy families, communities, and bring everyone together. So I'm gonna come over here to you, Elena, and by the way, Elena finished her PhD. This is Dr. Eagleshield. So congratulations, Dr. Eagleshield. Her research was focused on a very important technology, and when I meet with neurosurgeons and scientists, and they're thinking about how in the maternal health, how do we protect brain growth and protect the child and in the womb and out and looking for all of these different types of technologies. But there's a technology that has been around, again, for thousands of years, and that's the cradle board. I'm going to give this to you, Ilana, to talk about your research, your work, and the significance of these technologies that we have.
So I'll just share a little bit. I brought my baby's second home, his little cradle, or a chuich impa, and I was very interested in them because during the pandemic, I ended up giving birth to my 3rd child, and at the time, I had just started my PhD program. We ended up moving to Seattle, then the pandemic hit, and those native proverbs were like, you can always come home. So we booked it home, didn't even, think about it again. Oh, he hears my voice. So we didn't even think about it. I know, we should, brother, Johnny, bring it up so they could see the cradle board. And so we knew that, through community work that we were doing, our organization was started during the Water is Life movement. It's called the Miniwitoni Miniwitoni Health Circle. That was another thing we started. But Vanna White over here, just kidding. But so we started an organization, and it was really for frontline support, and it ended up turning into this really beautiful organization during the camp. At the time, it was called the Medic Healers Camp, and so when it closed down, we were tasked, everybody left Standing Rock, and so we were tasked to continue the work, the health work, and we took it to our community, and at the time, it was the Miniwitoni Clinic and Farm. And our communities, we went to IHS, we went to all the Title VI program, we went to all the tribal programs, tribal health, and we're, what do we want this to look like moving forward? And they decided, our community is we don't need a free clinic, but how do we continue to uplift our lifeways? Because during the camp, it was, who was able to come to the Standing Rock when the pipeline was. Hey, oh, not too many. Cool. Hey, you guys are all my relatives. Just kidding. But we, so we got to see beautiful things there. There were so many things that we didn't. So I grew up on Standing Rock. I grew up with my dad and being a CHR, my mom being a nurse. For 30 plus years, they were in their positions, and it was even before we had ambulances. So my dad's little radio would go off. And then he would throw his little light on and we'd zoom around to where, I'm sure that wasn't legal back then. But that's the kind of community work that I was involved in. And so when the pandemic hit, we went home. We were involved in I might have to nurse him. We were involved in community work, and we were finding out that moms were birthing their babies and they had to be alone. And sometimes them and their babies were contracting COVID. And during the time, it was very, very scary. And so for me, being pregnant, not knowing what to do or what the next steps were, and I'm a creator. I bead and quill and sew and do all the things. And so I was trying to prepare myself for this baby, for what would possibly become. And just everything started to fall into place. My husband, his relative was married to a midwife, and from my understanding at the time was the only midwife in North Dakota. And there's no, there's no support for what midwifery care could look like or should look like in North Dakota or South Dakota. And so I just started to create, and I created a cradle board, started to learn more about it. My dad ended up finding my cradle board from when I was a baby. My husband had a cradle board, and there was a gap in between that knowledge, between when I'm 35 now, and so between that knowledge in our community, there hadn't been teachers of this. And so we, started to build cradle boards and learn more about it. My research, we worked with a few families, and there's just so much that comes with it. There was an elder that shared with us that the cradle board is a whole classroom. The baby, you don't have to tell a baby what to learn or what to do. Their brain is developing by the security, by seeing their relatives around them, seeing who loves them, seeing the safety when they get tied into it. They get to be at eye level, or get to see when relatives are harvesting, or just they get to see love all the time. And so we got to do this as my research, and we learned all kinds of things that go into this. Like we were uplifting ceremonies in our community, and the families were learning how to do that. We were enacting futurisms, this wouldn't be practical a long time ago. We wouldn't have a heavy beaded cradle board running from a bear. And so we also are being expressive in ways where for so long we've been suppressed, and so there's stories that go into the beadwork. The runners represent the Wanahit Chachanku, or the Milky Way, or they also represent, the backbone of our community. There's just so much that went into it, and I could talk all day about it, but I'm gonna grab him.
Thank you. So if you look at this cradle board, they come in many, many different forms and different pieces and for different tribes. And imagine the hundreds of tribes, right? We say 574. Those are just the federally recognized. Don't count the state or Native Hawaiian or any of our other indigenous groups, but many, many have a cradle board similar. So when the baby is inside of this, he is completely secure. His neck, his head, it's almost immobile. You probably haven't heard him all day, have you? He is really, this brings such a level of security and comfort, preventing traumas or movements or all sorts of different. So very, very special, and serves many, many different purposes. But like you said, it's a classroom. So I want to come over here to Iktomi to talk a little bit about some of the traditional prenatal services and care, and what that is in your work, and what that looks like, and maybe even some examples. Or so you collectively there's probably I'm looking maybe 100 years worth of knowledge on this stage alone. And I know both of you have been committed since you were teenagers, basically, to this work. So they were already providing prenatal care and care for communities before we even knew what the word prenatal care was. And so I just want to recognize that lived experience and that knowledge, and how far, even though we might look young, but it goes far back. So if you can go ahead and tell me, thank you.
Sure. I guess I started caring for my women relatives when I was a little girl, when my mom was having babies. I'm one of 9 kids from my mom's side, and I won't even go on to my dad's side. But so I always wanted to take care of my mom when she was pregnant, and I wanted to get ready for the babies when they came, and because they were going to be my babies, you know, they were my little siblings, but they were, in my head, they were mine. So I guess I started back then, and you know, my first cousin who I grew up with, closest with every day, all day, she got pregnant when I was 15, and I cared for her the whole time, rubbed her swollen legs, fed her, rubbed her hair, you know, brushed her hair, everything that I could think of that I knew that I would want, you know, just as like a woman, just as a human actually. And then you think of, you know, whatever symptoms they're going through, you just kind of want to care for them as a good relative. And so I guess I just kind of always had it instilled in me. And I think it was because of my family and our teachings. You know, my mom always said, "You're Dakota first." You know, that's what we think of first. I don't think of birth as an event. You know, it's kind of a life way. It's a ceremony, and because of history and the historical traumas that we've had to go through, we lack the knowledge of so many medicines that help us prepare, stretching that helps us prepare, ceremonies that help us heal and prepare before and after, stuff like that. And as a birth worker, when I work with a mom, I work with them where they're at. Sometimes I get connected with them early on. Sometimes I get connected with them right before they go into labor. And so I do what we can do, and a lot of times ceremony is the first place that I like to go, because that's like Tumi Faith was saying, you know, that's our way of life. It was just, maybe it's magic to people, but it's kind of how it was back then. And so I feel like they knew something. We survived for so long and thrived before colonization that that's the data that we have that shows what we did was right, you know. And so when I do my birth work with the women, I stay with them as much as they want me to, or as little as they want me to. I'm still relatives with some of the moms that have given birth to babies 5 years ago. Some of that care that I did with them during the time was, you know, I make sure that we introduce traditional medicines, if possible, before pregnancy. But for sure, during pregnancy, after pregnancy, during birth, there's a lot of medicines that can help, and I really encourage our relatives to bring the whole family. So when I worked at the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I had an office, and I had great bosses that allowed me to do things the way that I kind of wanted to do them. So in my office, I didn't have a desk. I had a dining table and a couch and a fridge, because I wanted my families to come in there and experience everything together. I wanted to feed them, because, you know, when you go to a relative's home, they feed you and they give you something to drink. And so I always tried to make sure I had that stuff there. And during the pregnancy and perinatal time for a mom, family's roles really heightened, and especially the male roles. And so I really encouraged the male relatives to, you know, rise up to their potential and do a lot of the things that, you know, we asked them to do, like carrying the fire, building the cradle board. I took the cradle board class with Elena in Morton, Minnesota. When was that? September? And that's hard work. Holy, my hands. I had dreams of being pricked for days. And I was like, there's a reason why men did this a long time ago, you know. So we really encourage that type of stuff. Let's see what else. We encourage them to light the fire for the families, for the communities, that whenever birth, just like a lot of times in funerals, people still light fires for that funeral, for that body, for that spirit to go home. And so in birth, we also do the same thing. And we ask that the male relatives do that so that the baby's spirit has that light, that guidance, and also for the families and friends, whoever wants to in the community, to come and make prayers for that birth journey, for that family, for that mom and that baby spirit coming. And we really encourage delayed cord clamping. We encourage drinking water because, we carry our babies in water. It's really important to have clean, really good water. Spring water is best, coming from Unchimaka. We encourage them to create a birth space. We really encourage them to make it their own time. A lot of times in hospitals, because I had 3 daughters, and I did not know during that time all of this stuff. I was still in the belief that the system kind of knew more, just because you're not taught a lot of things growing up, and so you kind of just go with the flow. But now that I know more, I really try to encourage our women that there's not only one option. We don't always have to go into the hospital because, unfortunately, the disparities and the statistics are there. In Minnesota, Native American women die 8 times higher than a white woman during birth. And so it's crucial that we bring in our own ways, and not to say that the hospital is not a place to birth children, but there's definitely other options that are healthier and carry our own way of life. I don't know if that's good enough.
Oh, that's plenty good. So thinking about clinics and hospitals and we have lots of expertise in the room thinking about these different spaces here, right? We're here at Health and Human Services. We're here with lots of colleagues that work inside of these critical spaces. What can we teach them for women that do, because the question isn't so much one or the other. Sometimes it's both, right? You need the traditional health, you need that Western. You need them to talk to each other, you need them to respect each other, you need them to integrate to have the best outcome. And so what are some of the things that you could offer to our clinicians, those that are watching online, and others here, that what could be implemented? We do have models where we have both coexisting in a space because sometimes that's needed. But what would something that you could share with?
I think it's not sometimes, it's all the time that they should be paired together, because it's really interesting for me and it's rewarding to listen to the 2 nieces here, because I grew up in a different dimension or a different era, different generation, where my sisters were born at home. I wasn't born at home because of the economics. So when you talk about maternal child health, I see the clinic, I see a room where you have to be on the schedule. You can't go there if you're not part of prenatal day, which is Wednesday. So I come from a generation where I know that our young women and men are craving storytelling because they don't have a concept that like I do, and I can't be stingy with those stories. And so those elders that you have in the community, they're the PhD level people that have to be there to share that. And it's also even in code language. It's like, if you have a white practitioner there or a different nation practitioner, because we have a lot of Asian people and different races that come to our clinic, if you don't know the code of how to talk to our people, whether it's res language, whether it's whatever it is in the places that we live, and it's like that whether it's in the school or whether it's in the clinic. And so once they recognize that, it opens up and they respond. And so I'll give you an example, because that can happen in the clinic too. But I went by because of an expulsion. Well, first of all, I feel like your question has to be the baseline has to be set that some of those answers are not in the refined organizations that you're talking about. We have to be real about that. So we have the government over here, which is the ultimate colonial structure. Over here, you have the tribes, which is neo-colonial, new colonization. Over here, you have the surviving grassroots of where I come from. So all these years, we figured out we cannot go into the neo-colonial structure sometime to get our answers. It's not safe. And so besides, when we started our traditional society, the first gathering 30 years ago, 100% of the 25 women that came had either been molested or raped. So maternal child health care was last on the list. You just got by if you had gas money to get to the clinic. And I remember I called the Indian Health Service and I said, could we do a nutrition thing over at Braveheart Lodge? And she said, I'm sorry, we have to do this in the clinic. And I said, okay, forget you, we'll do it on our own. So over here, Braveheart Society was revived from a long time ago. We carried the dead from the battlefield. We put the bones up on the scaffolds. And then 30 years ago, we realized that everybody was debilitated and injured from colonial abuse. So we started calling their spirits home to have them stand in full spirit. So one of the grandmas came forth and she said, you're not only doing physical, you're doing emotional healing. You're bringing back people from emotional death. So a lot of the moms that you're working with and the fathers, they have suffered emotional death and they're not standing in full spirit. They don't even like to listen to what you're telling them, especially if it's on a handout. And so an example, I went by to one of the schools and they had expelled this girl and she's a student, she's gonna graduate, she's just a sweetie and somebody attacked her at school, so I went to help her out. And so I walk in the school and all of a sudden the Native counselor comes up and she says, Grandma Faith, we need you in the bathroom over here. I wasn't even there for that reason, but they called me down the hallway and there were 3 men principals standing outside that bathroom. And they're all kind of standing there like sumo wrestlers. And I said, what's going on? And they said, she locked herself in the bathroom and she's endangering herself and she won't come out. And I said, who is it? And so they told me. And so I went in there, grandma voice, hey, and this isn't her name, but Avery, what's up? It's Grandma Faith. They took my phone. I want my phone back. Somebody's after me. Just like that, because I had the code to how to talk to this child. And so within 5 minutes, she walked out with me, and the sumo wrestlers were standing there glaring at me. And I made a deal with her. I said, you go back into the classroom, cause no trouble, no drama, just sit still, and I'll have you let back into the classroom. When she came out, they all grabbed her. Just ruined my whole strategy, my intervention. But a child in trauma like that was able to listen. So a lot of the women and the girls that come in and the fathers, I wish the fathers would come in. The cradle board is absolutely wonderful because you have the father's help, right? This is a door for them. And some of them, it may not be their child. So there's a lot of in-between cultural understanding, and some of it is poverty, scarcity of resources, so much drama of survival that is happening in the community, and they're not going to tell you, especially if you're a nurse or somebody that doesn't even live in the community. So I feel like there has to be intercessors, there has to be a grandma close by, because we're matrilineal, we're like the buffalo. And so there's certain protocols that are in our community that would help. And so what we did at Braveheart, the first thing after we put the prayers in the water, the teepee doors started opening, we decided, which really addresses the maternal child health, to bring back the coming of age ceremony in a camp setting to all of our girls when they get their first moon. We have done almost 200 girls that have gone through the coming of age ceremony when they get their first moon. And we tell them, just think, this whole camp is for you. This is you. This is the most important 4 days of your life. We love you all 4 days and beyond. My daughter's doing a longitudinal study on those girls, and the majority of them are doing good. We have lost 1 to suicide, a car wreck, and addictions. That's about the national average. But she said the thing that she is finding out in all of the interviews, they will say this consistently, that in her study will be published eventually, She's got a doctorate out of University of Washington in anthropology. But they say it is really tough to have a friend on the res, or even in the city, or even in a school, Indian or non-Indian, because of the girl violence, the jealousy, the lack of structure and help. And so over and over again, they would say, those nights in the teepee when the fire was going, we could hear the coyotes, we could hear the spirits. We would tell our hardest stories. They'd have their little candles going in the teepee, and they'd tell about their molestation stories or who got them pregnant. And here us grandmas are saying, go to bed, shut that light off. We didn't know what was happening inside of that teepee. So I think the deeper thing is colonial abuse. They have been injured. There's a study out of Omaha, and I worked with a colleague on that. It said they did an assessment of the impact of intergenerational trauma. You would think the people my age that came from boarding school, the trauma would be higher. It's higher with the younger kids because the traumas have increased and the cultural connections have been severed. So if you do not have a cultural connection in your clinic, then you're getting further away from effectiveness. And I would just say that bluntly. Look hard in your community because there are PhDs out there that can help. And there's even young ones that are very, very wise, even though they might be teenagers. So I would say the wealth of the community is our culture, and that's what it comes down to.
Thank you. So we're at that point where we're going to open up for a few questions, and then we're going to get ready for our next. Are there any questions in the audience? Questions, comments? Okay, with that, anyone with that, I would like to go ahead and thank all of our really special guests here. Thank you for being with us today. And I'm sure there'll be more questions or items that we could connect on later. But I really think this conversation moving into the future and thinking about how do we scale the type of work that needs to be done to really improve maternal health outcomes, really thinking about different types of preventative factors and even looking at cardiovascular disease and other pieces that are really impacting our young women who are getting ready to have children or moving into those phases. We need healthy bodies to have healthy futures, and we need healthy young girls, boys, women, men to have healthy communities.
Can I say a couple things?
Sure.
I think that one of the things that we have to strive for is to create a sense of safety. The biggest thing that's going to combat trauma is safety. So I feel like maybe we didn't create some safety because we don't have any questions. I'd love to hear some questions. It's a two-way process. But while you're thinking about your question, because I'd like to have about 4 questions, really hard ones. I'd like to acknowledge a very special person in the room that I haven't seen for a period of time. But I talk systems a lot because I've been through a lot of systems in my lifetime. I've been a school counselor, a coach, a teacher, college instructor. I've been a mental health therapist. And one of the most rewarding things is I was a PTSD therapist in the VA. And I worked with combat veterans. And for 17 years, I was a contractor with 3 VAs. And that was a primary place where I learned about calling back the spirit with combat veterans. And so, Buck, can you stand up for me? And could you give my friend a hand? Yes, my hero. Okay, 4 questions.
Can I would like to make a comment really quick. I think one of the things that needs to happen also within clinical systems or any time we're trying to integrate these services is really thinking about what that paradigm shift is going to look like. Because I think for so long, like has been talked about, that these things were so natural for so long. Our traditions, our belief system was so strong where earlier my dad mentioned, you could give them this really powerful medicine that we know is powerful. And then on one hand, it could be just a tea to somebody who doesn't have that belief or that understanding of what it means to meet Creator halfway and to really believe in the power of our life ways. And so because of this colonial system that Tony is sharing about, And I know from Dr. Karina Walter's class that it's a structure, right? It wasn't just one event, that it's this continuous structure that is, it's in our tribal councils, it's in our, our own tribal programs. Even though we have this mind, they told us that we can have these new systems where we could what is it called? We're in the what period are we in? Yeah, self-determination period. But really, we're still very, very, not feeling safe. And so I think about like why these movements are so important, and why like we have coming of age ceremonies as well. We have a P'tei Sawi Society. We also have Hokshi Chantgapi, which are baby welcoming ceremonies. We have all of these ways that we are teaching, because we have to practice it as well, that we're teaching families to prophesy over their babies, to prophesy over themselves, and to really figure out what it means to have that belief and to meet Creator halfway, to call their spirits back. And so, I'm with Tui on the questions.
Captain Killsback.
Yeah, thank you. Very good panel here. So for Ms. Spotted Eagle, you mentioned earlier about standing as a full spirit. And in my previous position, before I went back to CDC, I was the CEO for the Northern Cheyenne Service Unit. And one of the providers that I had, one of my internal medicine docs, he brought to my attention, I think we brought this up to area, but anyway, he felt like there was a lot of rush for specialists to amputate patients. Like they went straight to the process of actually amputating our diabetic patients because of their foot, their extremities conditions, and he felt like that was an extreme measure. I don't know what the experience is probably in Great Plains area, but it was a bit alarming to me to see that, because I even equated that to like some of the dental visits. A lot of dentists that were getting these referrals are so quick to pull teeth. Yep. So I think that was something that I really wanted to understand why. I don't know if it was a state. Didn't want to make an assumption, but is that something that, because that takes away the self-esteem of a lot of Native people when you take pieces of them. Because you mentioned earlier in my panel about how like Cheyennes, when we go to the next world, that we want to go whole, right? So I think you talked about that. So I just wanted to hear what your perspective on those types of things. Thank you.
I love your question, because when that comes up, we can't change the subject. And it's real easy to do that in the clinic when you look at the clock. But if there's something coming up, then you're blocking it. So calling the spirit is a very old ceremony that many tribes have. In our language, it's Nagi Kichopi. It's actually, English is backwards for us. So Nagi is spirit, Kichopi is calling. And so in Western science, in Western mental health, they call it disassociation. So when you're going through the trauma response, and this is coming from a clinician, because I worked in a psychiatric unit with youth, and some of the girls were pregnant. And so when they're in that space of denial, like disassociation, they do not feel, they do not hear, they can shut you out, and they're very dangerous because they can injure people, hurt people. And so when I worked in the VA and in my own tribe, and the work that we've done in our society, we go emotionally, spiritually, physically, go back and retrieve that spirit, because usually you have stacked trauma. And time again, when I worked with the veterans, they would tell me it was combat. But almost 99% of the time when I worked with them, it'd be way down here, and it was an original trauma that happened when they were little boys and little girls. So if you're a little boy and a little girl and you have that original trauma and you grow up, you're pretty tough. You're pretty hard. And the effect that it has on our Indian kids is that they love really hard because they've lost so much. And so that's why the suicide rate is they finally find somebody and they kill themselves. And so what I advocate for, if there's any educators in the room that dare to go out into the villages and network with the grandmas, we need to have middle school classes where we tell them they are going to break up with somebody. And it might be a good thing if they break up with them. But you are going to break up with someone. But because there is such loss, when they latch on to somebody, it is the end of the world. And so oftentimes it's after they get pregnant. It's a real trauma time. So you got to have somebody who can understand that and just not get lost in the handouts and the lists, because that's disassociation as a clinician. Does that help a little bit?
Well,
Because you can see it all over. And so when we do the calling of the Spirit, we're bringing back, and I've seen physical changes. I remember down at Savix, we did a calling for one of the veterans. And I remember when I was working with him, he said, I don't know what you're doing to me, but I'm really hot. And I said, well, when I first met you, you're pretty dang cold. Not just symbolically, but he was pretty cold-hearted. And it's like his spirit was coming home. And so that's what, it's metaphysical, it's spiritual, and it's powerful.
and I just want to add, I think it varies tribe to tribe as well, because my husband is a Rikra. I'm also a Rikra on my mom's side. And they would talk about whenever they lost a relative that they would, or if they were mourning of any kind, they would cut off the tip of their finger. And that was like to show people that they were in mourning and to take better care of them and to be gentler to them. And so I think of all of those things that are like, you know, like cutting even. I know it's really, it could be like suicide ideology, but we had that long time ago. I think we romanticize how, you know, our ancestors dealt with things. We thought, you know, just these, they were magical for sure, but that they didn't deal with things, and they did. You know, there was ways that we handled it. And so even thinking about cutting, that's taboo to talk about. But, you know, I've had relatives where if they were going through those things, then we would take them to sweat and offer other alternative things for them. Like you know, I don't want to get into too many things within of ceremonial stuff, or I don't know. That's also something I feel, you know, like how much do we share? How much don't we share? Like I think of Lexi Vine. How much did he share? And I'm like, it's cool because you know, he wrote books about it, and he's not here now, but he probably took a lot in his time, you know. And so I'm like, do I have to wait till I'm gone to share? So anyways, but yeah, so those things, like they probably really do go through a mourning of missing a piece of them. But I also wonder of how much of that is influenced on, like, you got to go to the other side whole, like maybe Christianity or something. So yeah, I think it's, again, just really thinking of what we've been taught versus what our ancestors knew.
And I think when you say that, it's not, when we tell you these things, we're not giving them to you. We're asking you to partner with us and not to do another study without us, that we know. We have that knowledge. And so I think that's what we're saying. Don't take it. That's co-opting. But a lot could be done in that manner. So I would just say that much.
And I can add a little bit. I don't want to add too much either, but I know, like with the work that I do, a lot of our families, they didn't do the placenta ceremony with all of their kids except for this like last one, because then they're doing the traditional way. They have a lot of guilt for that, and so I had to go reach out, and I asked my mentor who got me into this work, Doreen Day, and other relatives like John Eagle, Twee Faith, you know, what can we do to remedy and to help heal this part of our relatives? And some of the responses that I got back was just like how Twee is saying, call the spirit back. You call that spirit of that organ or that leg or whatever it is back, because it has that energy that's connected to you no matter what, and no matter where it goes. And so I just want to add that. Thank you.
So it's really important to know too that, you know, how much do you share? There are so many different tribes, and many wish and shouldn't have to ever share. So let's recognize that too, that is not okay for all. Even what's been shared, we're grateful for, but we have to recognize too that many of us come from nations, and we choose to protect that. And so thinking through when we're building, health systems, or how, there have to be other alternatives just to providing, traditional care. Maybe that's providing funding and support so a family can create their cradle board. Maybe that's providing funding for car seats and food, and maybe that's sitting there and writing a prescription for healthy food. So there are lots of other ways to promote within the clinical space that does not have to be or touch all of these pieces. And so I want to just put that out there as well, right? So we're really grateful, but we're also really cautious. We have to remember that all of people suffered and died for the protection of what we have today, and we choose to maintain the protections and the sanctity of that. So we are pretty out of time, and so I want to thank you for so you got 1 question and 3 responses, so that's 4, right? Okay. So thank you so much for sharing and joining us, and let's give everybody our presenters a round of applause. So Kunoha, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you once again for our panelists on this incredibly interesting and important discussion. We appreciate the knowledge and wisdom that you shared with us, as well as ways and pathways for us to move forward. So thank you so much for that. Before we close out for today, I want to turn it over to Devin Delro, Principal Advisor for Tribal Affairs. Devin's going to give us some reflections of the day and a preview for tomorrow. We know Devin has been working hard with his team, who've been running around, and they've been sitting in the back and making sure that everyone has all of the their necessities, their materials, your lunches. So we want to show our appreciation and gratitude to the team, and appreciation and gratitude towards Devin as well.
Yat Devin Doro Yinshe Ashki Dashijine Ashin Nishlan O'Leary Bashashin Nishasha Dashache Bilagana Dashanali. Hi everyone, my name is Devin Delro. I am Principal Advisor for Tribal Affairs here in the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I am also a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I realize I am between you and the end of a long but very fruitful day, so I'll try and keep this short. Just wanted to take a minute to show some appreciation and gratitude. It's not often that we get to have these kinds of events here at the department, here in DC, surrounded by all these beautiful tribal flags. And when we do, it's always really nice to see so many familiar faces, so many tribal leaders who I respect and admire and who have been mentors to me. It's great to see so many federal colleagues in the House, so many people I get to work with every day, and people I haven't met. I'm really grateful that you were here today to share your time, your attention, your participation. And for those of you who I haven't met, I do look forward to meeting you. I also wanted to acknowledge the team that helped, put this whole event together. This was not an easy event to pull off, but we had everybody who we told about the Traditional Healing Summit was super excited to be involved, wanted to help out, whether it was identifying panelists, helping us travel in folks, making sure our agenda looked great. So I want to thank my colleagues at IHS, at ACF, at CDC, SAMHSA, ACL, NIH, OASH, CMS, FDA. I also want to thank my colleagues at our sister federal agencies, the VA, the White House Council on Native American Affairs. I also want to thank our organization partners, National Indian Health Board, as well, for helping support today's event. And then there are certain individuals that I really also wanted to call out individually to really thank for their help today. First off, Lillian Sparks Robinson, thank you so much for being a great MC for today. Really appreciate your help in helping us keep the agenda flowing and rolling with last-minute changes, really helpful. Also want to thank my team here at IEA for all their hard work, working throughout the week, early mornings, late nights, working through the weekend. It's a lot of work to put these things together. So first, I want to thank Elise Sparks Jackson for all of her help. I also want to thank Lisa Rivera Meisner as well for all of her help. And then I also want to take some time to thank my colleagues certain colleagues at IHS for being here and being so pivotal to helping us pull this together. Stacy Akafee is sitting in the back. Brittany Cordolette, I'm not sure if she's in here, but you've probably seen her running around. And then, of course, Carmela Roybal, who's been, pulling triple duties, helping moderate sessions, pulling speakers together. So thank you, Carmela. So thanks again for everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. We do have another jam-packed day tomorrow. We start the day a little bit earlier tomorrow, so please be mindful of that. We will start at 9 a.m. We will have coffee here at 8:30, so feel free to, arrive early, get situated, relax, have a cup of coffee, and then we will start promptly at 9 a.m. We will have remarks from our HHS Secretary, Javier Becerra. We will have remarks from the VHA Undersecretary. We also have a number of other panel discussions focusing on all sorts of different traditional healing practices, including food, music, and more. And just really want to encourage you all to continue the discussions. I know it's always really good to see some of the side conversations that are happening and all the inspiration we're taking away from today and tomorrow. So really want to encourage you all to continue that for tomorrow. But with that, we are at the close of today and just really want to wish you all a good evening, and we will see you bright and early tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.